early in my time on the football team at Wisconsin. I got done in practice with a play, and I just remember behind me hearing Coach Alvarez screaming, "Hey, Wood, don't confuse effort with results." It's the type of mentality that I've taken with me in everything that I've done. Try as hard as you want, but at the end of the day, you have to accomplish the mission. When Team Rubicon started, I'd only been out of the Marine Corps for about 60 days, and the Haiti earthquake happened. I was inspired to help in some way. I felt like my experience in the Marine Corps had given me the opportunity to make a difference in that moment. Team Rubicon focused very deeply on these really critical issues around disaster response and humanitarian work. And I think what excites me about Groundswell is unlocking billions or even $1 trillion worth of philanthropy to address all problems. I think a trailblazer sees the world as it is and asks the question, how can it be better?
Thanks for joining me.
I wouldn't miss it.
So Jake and I were backstage and realized that we are the last act before happy hour. So
I've been in a lot of dangerous places in my life, but this is probably the most dangerous, being between a room full of people and an open bar.
This is a great audience, and that was a great intro. So I think we'll just jump right into it. You know, in that short video, you got to meet Jake, the football player, Jake, the Marine, Jake, the entrepreneur, Jake, the voice of change, which is our theme here. So I'd love to just dive in a little bit about that moment where you realized that you needed to do something different because the lives of the people in Haiti in 2010 had been so dramatically impacted.
Yeah, I don't think that there was ever this conscious decision. There was certainly this moment. I had gotten out of the Marine Corps. I actually did my training for the Marine Corps, 800 yards from here at boot camp, which shares a fence line with the San Diego airport, so I might have some flashbacks. But I'd been out of the Marine Corps for about 60 days. I did 2 tours, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan, hard tours, and I got out of the Marine Corps in late 2009. Earthquake hits Haiti, and there was this moment for me of how can I help? How can I be of service? And part of it, I was in a position in my life where I could say yes, I could go. I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't have a plan. So, like anybody that doesn't have a plan, I figured I'd go get an MBA and work in finance. And was waiting for those applications to come back when that happened. So I was in a moment in time where I could say yes. And ultimately, I called a couple of guys that I served with, and we put a team together. We got to Haiti after a couple days, and it's incredible because that moment of inspiration where we had this bias for action led us to help people in Haiti, but then on to building this incredible organization that 15 years later has snowballed into one of the largest disaster response organizations in the country. We've got over 150,000 volunteers, mostly men and women, that have come out of the military. We've responded to nearly 1,500 disasters and crises around the world and across every state in the U.S., helping people on their worst day. But it all began with that moment and a really foolish decision to go try to help some people.
Yeah, I think you're in an audience that would probably give you a pretty strong argument about whether that was a foolish decision or not.
It was ill-advised, I'll tell you that.
Well, I think there are 2 phrases that I remember from my childhood. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he was famous for saying things like, if you want to get something done, hire a busy person.
Yeah.
If you want to hire a leader, hire a Marine. You have a particular approach to leadership. It's about passion and community and about purpose. And my sense from talking with you is that a lot of that was about you identifying for the veterans you served with what was missing, and I'm sure your experience as well, right? What was missing when you came home? And so how did that lead to the way you thought about Team Rubicon? And I know when you began, you didn't think it would be 150,000 people, right?
No, I think we quickly realized the power that purpose had in unlocking the talents and the drive within individuals on a team. And certainly that it wasn't a surprise to me, having come from the Marine Corps, a very purpose-driven organization with an important mission. But what we saw in building Team Rubicon was we were tapping into that loss of purpose that many men and women experience when they leave the military. You go from, maybe you're an 18-year-old kid and you join the Army out of Bangor, Maine, and the Army gives you a uniform and a rifle, and you become a sergeant, and people call you by your rank, and they pin a medal on your chest. They thank you for your service, and then at some point, 20 years later, you take that uniform off for the last time, and you don't have that purpose or that sense of identity anymore, that pride in self. You lose that band of brothers and sisters that you had. But we were able to replace that for these individuals, and I think what happened was we were able to unlock all of their talent, all of their passion, and align it behind what we were doing. Now, don't get me wrong, purpose is a universal human need. Everyone needs purpose. And the other thing that when you talk about leadership and how I think about leading, I think storytelling is such an important component of leading people. And it ties back into purpose because human beings are storytellers. We have told stories since we invented language and since we invented the campfire. We sit around campfires and we tell stories. We tell stories to think about our history. We tell stories to explain the things we can't explain, to make each other laugh, to make each other cry, all of those things. And whether we admit it to ourselves or not, we all want to be a part of a story. It's part of our nature. And we want that story to be consequential, and we want our role in that story to be consequential. And so when you think about how you lead organizations, your organization is nothing but a story. It's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end, it's got characters and protagonists and antagonists and plot twists and all of those things. And how you talk about your people, how you talk to your people, how you help them think and imagine themselves as a part of the story of the company or the team or whatever it is that you're running, is how they will show up. Because if you talk about them like a hero, they'll show up and they'll put in hero-level work. But if you talk about them and treat them like an unnamed character in that story, guess what? That's how they show up. And so I just think it's really powerful to tell stories, to communicate that purpose, that shared purpose that you have as a team, as a business, and then unlock that hero's level of effort within the people.
And you certainly have done that with Team Rubicon.
We've tried,
Well,
work in progress.
I think, for those of you who had the opportunity today and yesterday to hear stories from the Whites, who suffered an incredible amount of financial difficulty, family trouble as a result of two quickly moving hurricanes. We heard about the fires in California and the responses to that. And I was thinking about our talk today and about how you have purposely put yourself in the intersection, right, of probably moments in people's lives where systems have been, maybe they were broken before, but they certainly weren't standing strong at that moment, where people certainly in Haiti were struggling economically before this happened. Tell us a little bit about what it takes as a leader to be in that moment of extreme chaos and suffering, and managing to find the North Star, drive your people forward, and create relationships in the midst of all of that chaos.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's remarkably easy because the need is so stark, right? The situation itself is complex. You have, obviously a disaster has happened, you have limited resources, limited information, it's challenging operationally, but the North Stars are easy to find. We've always framed it at Team Rubicon. You are showing up to help someone on their worst day. This is possibly the worst day of their life, right? It certainly ranks in the top, whatever the number is. And so you have this obligation to show up, not just, in this kind of mission-ready mindset, which Marines kind of have a tendency to fall into, but to also show up with empathy and compassion, because you're there not just to, for example, responding to a hurricane in North Carolina. We're not just there to tarp their home or muck and gut the house after a flood. Of course, we're there to do that, but we're there as maybe the first touch point on their journey to recovery, which is important. They will always remember how you left them feeling in that moment. And it goes down to little things, We have this cultural standard within Team Rubicon. When we are done working on a home, we will leave it, like clean, like TR clean. We call it TR clean. So you can imagine, maybe it was a hurricane, a bunch of trees got knocked down. We using chainsaws, we pull the trees off the roof, we tarp the roof, and then we'll sweep all of the sawdust off the porch. And sometimes volunteers will ask, why are we taking time to sweep this roof? Why don't we move on to the next house? And you take a moment and you say, because when these homeowners come back, that sawdust is going to remind them of what they experienced and what they suffered. But if they come back and this house looks clean, like we really cared, like we went that extra mile, they're going to remember that part of that moment in that journey. And so there's these cultural touch points and milestones that you insert into that process to ensure that when you are meeting someone on their worst day, it's not just about the mission, it's about that mindset.
Right. So Team Rubicon becomes 150,000. I know on your volunteers, and on your way there, you not only confronted the inability of systems that existed to take care of these, right? But you also had to innovate your own systems, right? And raise money, right? Yeah. And when I was thinking about all of the challenges you voluntarily, signed up for, raising money probably wasn't on the top of your list, but I would put it on the top of the chaos and catastrophe part of our lives, right? Building organizations with purpose and serving. Now you've got an organization that's operating on its own. You've stepped down as its CEO and are now its executive chairperson. It's a lot of titles in one, but you've earned it. How did you find that moment in the organization where you had the confidence to say, it's time for me to move on, and the organization's okay?
I mean, it was hard, admittedly, and I probably wake up every day and wonder why I did it. I think organizations are constantly evolving. They need to be, otherwise they're just slowly dying. And I think that part of that evolution is the people that are leading it. So that was one thing. I felt like change is always important. But also, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I think I got to a point after running it as CEO for 11 years, I was ready for the next challenge. And one of the problems that I had observed was the inefficiency in the philanthropy landscape. And so, I sat there and I started thinking about what's the next problem that I could solve. And one of the issues that kept bubbling up in my mind 5 years ago when I was going through this thought exercise, my wife and I are pretty charitable, and we give money to charity, and I was always frustrated by the fact that we couldn't get a donor-advised fund, which is a tax-advantaged charitable giving vehicle. Typically, only high-net-worth households have them. And I was frustrated that I couldn't get one because I wasn't rich. I wasn't wealthy enough, because you had to have a big $20,000 minimum contribution to open one. And I had the echoes of one of my mentors in my head who said, Jake, billion-dollar ideas come from taking things that only rich people have access to and democratizing them for everyone else. And so I raised some venture capital money, and we built Groundswell with this initial vision of democratizing access to donor-advised funds, or DAFs. And so we built that platform, and today, our core product makes donor-advised funds an employee benefit. So helping companies to unlock the generosity of their employees, providing them a financial tool to do that more efficiently and cost-effectively.
And within that, Groundswell is solving a problem that you experienced at Team Rubicon when you were needing to raise money, and that money didn't show up at the moment of the crisis. It might have shown up 60, 90 days later. Yeah. So in Groundswell, you've taken that lesson and said, we can solve that so that nonprofits who are doing critical, essential work aren't waiting forever, right? Or, it's a 60-day invoice that, the government takes 120 days to pay, right? So it feels through all of the conversation that you and I have had that there are these threads that you pull through and have a, not unique, but extraordinary ability to kind of look at the problem, understand where you can go at it. And Jen opened our session the other day with small steps, outsized impact. I think that is what you saw in building Team Rubicon. And I think one of the things that we have been hearing over the last couple of days has been the essential role that nonprofits play. And so having built one, having struggled with some of the consequences of not well-designed systems, having to raise money and the timeliness of that, Groundswell becomes an answer to part of that problem. Where do you see the community of veterans at Team Rubicon intersecting with Groundswell? Is that in your thinking, or?
I don't really see those two intersecting as much. But I think one important point here to make is that you mentioned nonprofits playing this important role in our community, and that's true. They play a vital role as a social safety net, filling in gaps that government services don't provide in the U.S. And if we bring this back to disasters and the work that those veterans at Team Rubicon do, supporting an organization like Team Rubicon, please do it when a hurricane hits. That'll be my pitch. But the reality is, disasters exacerbate every single social issue that is already plaguing a community. So if you care about animal welfare, the needs of animal shelters go up tenfold after a disaster. If you care about domestic violence, guess what spikes after a disaster? If you care about early childhood education, any of those things. The point I would make is double down on that same thing. That issue that you're already passionate about, again, disasters just rip those issues apart in the aftermath of a hurricane or an earthquake or a flood, whatever it is. So it's really critical that we support those nonprofits in those communities because they've got some hard work cut out for them in the aftermath of those.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I want to jump backwards just a little bit. You told the story when we were talking earlier about having to teach a veteran how to read a financial system. And you had earlier made the point that a lot of men and women who sign up for the military do so because it's their best financial choice at the time. And yet we have seen lots of data that suggests that when they come home from a deployment, not infrequently, certainly I think higher rates among the veterans from Vietnam and from Afghanistan and Iraq, that the compounding effect of a deployment and having financial instability becomes a real challenge. Mm-hmm. And identifying how to provide and who you might think is best to provide, right? The kinds of support, education tools for veterans who are such a significant part of our population and provide such an essential service to the country. How do you envision, right, moving that part of the problem forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack. You're right. When I first got to my unit in the Marine Corps, one of my colleagues, a young gentleman from Wisconsin, actually, bounced a check. And when asked, how did you bounce the check by the platoon sergeant, he said, "Well, I had checks in my checkbook. I didn't really understand. I couldn't write checks." And I mean, it was revealing a sense of financial illiteracy that was astonishing to me. And of course, like being the college boy, the battalion commander thought it was a great idea for me to give a 15-slide overview of personal finance to the battalion, which did not make me particularly popular as the new guy in the unit. But I think that reveals something about the failures of our education system to teach basic financial literacy as a life skill, which I know some people in here, I'm sure, are addressing, and it's critical. But you're also right. We talked about this backstage. Financial stress can just destroy lives. And when you think about someone who's returning from a tour in Iraq or Afghanistan, the level of stress that they're already experiencing, they've been away for at least 7 months, maybe as long as 12 or 18 months. They may have missed the birth of a child. They certainly missed a birthday. Their spouse is overwhelmed. They don't know how to talk to each other when they get home. And now if you throw like the complications of financial stress on top of that, it creates a pot that's ready to boil over. And how tragic that we're gonna send someone overseas and then allow them to come home and see their family life deteriorate in that fashion because of something that's ultimately preventable, both by making sure that folks have the basic financial literacy that they need to thrive, but also by just ensuring that they have the tools and resources not to fall into that trap. I think that particularly in the veteran community, there's been a lot of movement around that issue. There's a lot of organizations that are assisting it. Obviously, we've continued to see pay raises within enlisted troops, which is good because it raises up their capacity to withstand that financial stress. But again, this is also not an issue that is just specific to the military veteran community. We see this in communities all across the country. It's something that, I know people are building solutions for that in this room, and my hat's off to you because it's so critical.
So let's jump back. You're building a fintech.
Totally not qualified to do that.
So in Team Rubicon, you started with a group of volunteers you knew. Now you've started this new business. How did you make a decision about who to hire, how to think about what you needed to drive this success?
Yeah, I mean, my approach to talent has always begun with readily acknowledging that I don't know anything and being willing to accept that and then go out and hire incredibly talented people to surround myself with. But I've always approached how do you find those people through this lens, this mantra that we developed at Team Rubicon, which was we are looking for individuals foolish enough to think that they can change the world and smart enough to have a chance. Right? So we're looking for people that have this sense of why not? Why can we not go do that thing that everybody else says is impossible? And like their level of talent, obviously important, but much less important than that willingness to have purpose propel them forward to an impossible task. And again, those aren't mutually exclusive. You can find incredibly talented people that are foolish enough to think that they can change the world. I've been pretty good at finding some of them, but that first part, by far the most important.
Right. So another theme from our conversations throughout yesterday and today is that we're operating in very uncertain times. You have an acronym that you've captured what that means and how it's a tool for you as you think about leadership. Can you tell everybody give them the acronym and tell them what it stands for?
Yeah, well, in under a minute, the military developed a way of thinking about chaos several decades ago called VUCA. Stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the whole thinking and philosophy about understanding the type of chaos that you're facing is that by better understanding the enemy, in this case the enemy is the chaos around us, you can better craft the strategies and tactics to cut through it. Now, the thing I'll stress here is that, yes, it's a chaotic environment. Who knows? I mean, there's probably been a tweet since I've been up on stage that has sent the stock market reeling in one direction or another. I don't know. The reality is it doesn't matter because that chaos that we're experiencing today it's an equal opportunity disruptor. Every one of your competitors, every one of your peers is facing that same chaos. And so this is when organizations and leaders sink or swim. So how are you gonna tackle the chaos that you're facing and capture opportunity? That's how I truly see the world that way, and I hope that you do as well. And if you want to talk about VUCA later, we can do it over a beer.
Okay. So our time is up. I saved the hardball question, I guess, for the end. You have 2 daughters. The older of the 2 Her first name is Valiha, right? You chose to give her a middle name, Hope. Can you tell us why you did that?
Yeah, well, her first name, Valia, is a Latvian name named after my wife's grandmother, who she adored. Her middle name is Hope, and I think as I kind of reflected on, at the time, the decade that I'd been running Team Rubicon, I'd been to the worst disasters in the world, the poorest communities across the country, and every time that the prospects of that community hinged on that one word, hope. When communities had it, when they maintained it, and oftentimes it might have been because Team Rubicon showed up on that darkest day, they had prospects, they had a chance at a brighter future. But you can always see a community, you can always see someone who has lost hope, and it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. And so if we can maintain hope, then we have hope for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Jake for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for